Hello, everybody, and welcome to Walking Between Shadows. I'm Taryn Elliott, and along with me is my amazing husband,
I'm Ben Elliott.
and we're here to talk about true crime all the time. More than a decade later, an arrest has been made in the Karen Swift cold case. Wife and mother of four, Karen Johnson Swift, disappeared after a Halloween party in Dyersburg, Tennessee on October 29, 2011. About 6 weeks later, her body was found 2 miles away from her home in a cemetery. Karen's case was featured in Dateline's Cold Case Spotlight digital series in 2015, more than 3 years after she was murdered. At the time, her husband, David Swift, was considered a person of interest. Karen had filed for a divorce 3 weeks before she disappeared. In the past 10 years, investigators continued to work diligently on Karen's case. On August 9, 2022, the Dyer County Sheriff's Office released a statement on Facebook announcing that David Swift had been indicted and charged with premeditated first degree murder. Swift, who had since remarried, was living in Alabama when he was arrested on Monday afternoon by members of the DCSO with assistance from members of the Jefferson County, Alabama Sheriff's Office. Dyer County Sheriff Jeff Fox stated in Tuesday's post, "Today is a good day for law enforcement, and I'm very pleased the grand jury returned an indictment against David Swift." Sheriff Fox continued to say, "We have literally spent thousands of hours on this case, and a lot of that time was spent dispelling false information and rumors. Our investigators never gave up and just kept going through the evidence, and I want to sincerely thank them for their diligence in this case." In October of 2019, the Dyer County Sheriff's Office concluded their investigation and turned evidence over to the District Attorney General, Danny Goodman's office. The District Attorney's Office reviewed the information and presented it to the grand jury on Monday. The sheriff explained that even in the early stages of investigation, David was always a suspect because all the evidence pointed to him. He states that investigators were able to rule anyone and everyone else out involving this tragic murder, and the grand jury made the right decision today by indicting him on premeditated first degree murder charges. Karen's mother, Carol Johnson, told NBC affiliate WMCA in October 2014, "It still hurts every day to know that somebody took my baby, killed her, took her down to the kudzu, and threw her out like a rag doll. It just breaks my heart." Carol also stated, "I think if I could know who to be angry at, I think I could start to heal. But as it is, it's just an open wound every day." Sheriff Fox stated in Facebook posts that he remained in touch with Carol throughout the years and made a promise more than a decade ago that one day the person that committed the murder would be brought to justice. So, almost 11 years after Karen was murdered, Sheriff Fox made a call. "As soon as David Swift was placed in handcuffs, I called Carol and told her the news. I also told her I had faith this case would be prosecuted, and today we had a very emotional conversation," said Fox. "She just wants justice for her daughter." Swift remains in custody at the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office without bond until an extradition hearing takes place. If convicted, he faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. Karen Sue Johnson was born January 25, 1967, in Galesburg, Iowa. Her parents are Gary and Carol Johnson of Arkansas. She has one brother, Jeffrey Johnson of Arkansas, and one sister, Lisa Curry of Arkansas. In school, Karen won numerous trophies and awards running 5Ks and track. Karen married David Swift on September 23, 1989. Karen loved her family and kids and always involved herself in their activities. Karen had two boys in college and was raising her younger daughters by the same standards.
Mhm.
This article came from Cold Case Spotlight,
Mhm.
and it was written by a woman named Veronica Fulton. I think that was done pretty recently too, because David Swift's arrest is only a month old. You know,
So she just kind of brought everything back up when this was announced that David Swift had been arrested.
right? And I've told you about this case for several years.
Yeah.
Well, a year. I've talked about this with you for
I think actually this when we met and started talking, this was one of the first ones you told me about was Karen Swift because again, we kind of grew up with a connection between us. We went to school with some people that were involved in this, directly or indirectly. We don't know. It just names have been mentioned along the way.
Yeah,
And
there was a lot of rumors going on with
mhm,
this
mhm.
case, and I think that that's what the sheriff's department was
Yeah, their biggest complaint was just having to deal with all the BS that people would say about it and the
sift through the
rumors.
rumors
Yeah,
because there's been a lot of them.
yeah.
And so what we do know is that Karen came home from a Halloween party at the country club on October 29th, and David Swift claims he saw her about 1 o'clock in the morning.
So does that mean he wasn't at the party? Was she there by herself?
I
Did she
believe
go single? I
I
guess.
think she probably went single. He was home with the kids, I believe, the
Yeah,
girls. I'm not sure, but I'm I don't I don't recall ever hearing that he was at this party
yeah,
at the country club.
yeah,
I did recall hearing that she was in an Karen was in an altercation with another female at the country club that night.
yeah. And that was just hearsay, right?
That was hearsay,
Yeah.
and that the tapes of the from the altercation that night were taken from the country club.
Now, was that part of like that Dateline episode, or was it part of some sort of documentary that we watched that they talked about the sheriff's department not being able to get access to those tapes? I mean,
Right.
I kind of think that was public knowledge.
That was public knowledge because that watched that on a podcast, I
Mhm.
believe, that was
Mhm.
done years ago.
Yeah.
And so we know that she came home from this party, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, she's tucking her daughter into bed. That's when David Swift claims that he's seen her last. And the next morning, she's gone. They
And
find and then he calls the police and makes a report. So they all come out and they take the report and they go down and start searching, and they
mhm.
find her car about a mile away with a flat tire,
Mhm.
but no Karen.
Did you ever see anything about the there being evidence in the vehicle, or I mean, like blood evidence or anything like that?
I did not see
So it's
that.
almost like she had a flat and somebody came and scooped her up, like she
Right,
just disappeared from the scene.
right. Yeah, or she never left and got in her vehicle.
Right, right.
This could have happened at the home,
Mhm,
and he could have disposed of her body.
mhm.
So we know that they had a lot of people looking for her.
Yeah, and this was rural Northwest Tennessee. I
Right.
mean,
There's not many people, on that road that she lived on was very country road, and there wasn't much going on around it.
mhm. Well, and back in that time, that also was pretty rural where their house was, where it was located,
Yeah.
and even where she was found was kind of a defunct cemetery. Like nobody was being buried there, hadn't been buried there in
Right, so
years.
they're looking and they didn't actually find Karen Swift until her body until December the 10th of
Mhm,
2011,
mhm.
and they found it at a deserted cemetery.
Yeah, so they lived on Willie Johnson Road, which is a few miles north of Dyersburg, kind of like you're going towards Reelfoot Lake.
Yeah.
And did they find her vehicle on that same road that she lived on, or was it on a different road, just kind of in the same area?
That I'm not sure of. I know it was a mile away from their home.
Hmm.
It had a flat tire.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if there was any blood evidence in the vehicle, this has not gone to trial yet. So they're gonna be very closed mouthed about everything.
yeah. So that's where I have to take a second and just throw a kicker in there for the Dyer County Sheriff's Department. I mean, the last case we did, it just really felt sloppy and
Debbie and
lackadaisical.
Ambria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Debbie and Ambria, and that was in a different county. It was Gibson County, which is where we are, but it seems like Dyer County's sheriff's department's really held things, close to the chest and put together some pretty definitive evidence here. Otherwise,
Right.
they wouldn't have arrested him and extradited him back to Tennessee.
Right. And premeditated. I mean, it's not even you would think. So let's go back to finding her at the cemetery.
Hmm.
So they search and search for Karen. There's posters everywhere, and social media was a thing then.
Hmm.
So it really got it was a big story,
Yeah.
and Dyersburg's fairly small too. I mean, everybody knows everybody.
Hmm.
not maybe so much as here, but in Gibson County, but
Mhm.
so they're searching, and on December the 10th is when they found her body, and it was some hunters that found her body at the cemetery there.
Mhm.
Her autopsy report came back, um, blunt force trauma to the head,
Mhm.
possibly from a hammer,
Mhm.
and we looked at the autopsy report
Mhm.
and the toxicology report, and Karen was pretty healthy lady,
Mhm.
running and
Yeah, she was into fitness in a big way.
right,
Yeah.
not a smoker, no drug using or anything like that, and the only thing that came back in her toxicology report was Benadryl and Tylenol and maybe caffeine.
Yeah, and a little bit of alcohol, but there again, the time that passed, we don't know if it, was a result of her having drinks and was killed, relatively quickly after that, or if it was just because the state of her body when they found it was pretty advanced in the decay cycle, and could something have fermented and caused that to report on the toxicology screen? I mean, they did pull liver samples.
They did.
Yeah, and so we're not doctors. We don't
No.
know. We just know what that says. There was alcohol present.
There was alcohol present.
Mhm.
Her body was found nude.
Mhm.
Her underwear were around her thighs.
Yeah.
She was not There was a rape kit done that she was not raped. It looked like somebody came up and just took her out quick,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Just smacked her in the back of the
She
head. Didn't
didn't know
even
what hit her, and she didn't.
right.
So,
And the
yeah,
rest of the autopsy just showed, like superficial wounds and stuff like there wasn't, mention of any other broken bones or stab wounds or anything like gunshot wounds or none of that.
no, she had her face was bruised up, or
It had some abrasions and
abrasions and under her arms and things because of possibly him dragging her,
mhm.
or
Mhm.
but they must have something really good if they've got him for premeditated. I mean,
Mhm.
it wasn't with it being it seemed like a crime of passion, but
Yeah, it doesn't sound like that's what they're thinking though.
no. And we know that Karen filed for divorce about 3 to 6 weeks before she come up missing.
Mhm.
It's rumored and said by a couple of her friends that Karen and David both were known for being swingers, or
They had a very active social life.
right. Now I don't know if they were swingers or if they were just cheating on each other,
Mhm.
you know. I don't know. That I
Sort
don't
of
know.
like an open relationship kind of thing.
Until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And one of the men that she was seeing you know, is was a prominent man in Dyersburg,
Mhm.
and paid for this divorce for her. And there goes some more rumors that got started with this case,
Right.
because just because somebody paid for her divorce does not make well, definitely they wouldn't want to murder. You would think they would not want to hurt her if they're going to pay for a divorce. I mean, they'd want to keep her alive if they're going to pay for a divorce.
Yeah, it almost seems like it'd been a motive for her husband because if he found that out, then
Exactly.
you
I
know
mean,
he can't
because
have her.
well, right, and we know that I don't think she worked.
Mhm.
So David Swift had the power of controlling the money.
Mhm.
And if she wanted to file for divorce, how was she going to do that if she wasn't making her own money and he was in control of all the money? And I think that if she went and told him, I filed for divorce. Well, how did you do that?
Mhm.
Well, I'm seeing this man that's got money and he paid for it,
Mhm.
and it pissed him off.
Mhm.
And that could have happened. He could have premeditated this for, the whole time that
Yeah.
she had, the 3 weeks or 6 weeks before, you know,
Yep.
because they didn't leave. They were both living in the same home.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, it's not like premeditation takes months or years to plan.
Absolutely not. I
It
mean,
could be done in a day or two.
and with it being premeditated, we don't know if he maybe told somebody or if he was looking it up on the internet. We do
Yeah.
know that when they searched his home, they took out all computers and
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah. That
cellular
also.
devices, and
Yeah. That also could be. They might have found evidence for a murder for hire plot. I mean,
yeah,
again, this is just us assuming or
right.
speculating, but
But I could see, there was no prior history of abuse, just
mhm.
infidelities between the
Mhm.
two of them.
Mhm.
They had divorced and remarried before. They were married for 22 years.
So when they divorced, did they remarry someone else and then get back together, or did they just divorce and then they came back together?
It looks like they just divorced and came back together.
Gotcha.
They married in, what did I say, 89, 87, or 89,
Yeah.
and so she passed away in 2011.
Yeah. Well, so she didn't have any family in the immediate area. So still, I think I'm a little confused on how they wound up in Dyersburg, Tennessee. Was he from Dyersburg? 'Cause
Yeah, possibly, and I
but we
don't kn
don't know.
we don't know that.
Okay.
No.
The little bit that I looked into was what was going on with the investigation between her disappearance and then them finding her. So 2011 to 2022, there was a private investigator that somebody hired uh, that came into Dyer County and began investigating um, a family there that I would assume that she was led to believe that they had something to do with it.
Right.
So that put her focus on them, and that turned into a civil nightmare
Yeah, shit
in them.
show,
Yeah, I mean,
basically.
yeah, she just kind of put herself in a position to have tunnel vision towards these people, and I think maybe lost sight of the big picture, and it resulted in, I think they filed a lawsuit at some point. We don't know what the disposition of that lawsuit
No,
is, or was, but yeah, I mean, it just felt real diversionary looking into that.
it did. It
Yeah.
it seemed like it was odd, and I know I watched a podcast
Mhm.
with this investigator on it, I believe around the time that David Swift was indicted
Mhm.
and arrested just this last month,
Mhm.
and it looks to me, by the way she was talking, that she was fairly close to David Swift and the kids, because one of the daughters, she claimed, called her during the arrest of David Swift
Mhm.
and said they were arresting her dad, and she wanted to know if this in this PI knew why.
Mhm.
And the private investigator said, she can't fathom David Swift doing this.
Yeah, she didn't know why at the time. I mean, she said she didn't know why,
Right.
right? And then I think since she's found out and had other conversations with them, I mean, that leads me to believe that that family hired her.
I would I was wondering the same thing, if maybe David Swift hired her
Mhm.
to come in and do this investigation.
That goes back to where I think it seemed diversionary.
Yeah.
So yeah, it made a lot of noise in the meantime,
Yeah,
but
especially when you pick on a prominent family that,
mhm.
you know, you just can't do that, really. I mean,
Well, obviously it's not worked out or not working out,
right.
but I I still, hear this guy left Dyersburg at some point, probably not that long after it happened, took the family to Alabama, and has gotten to live a pretty normal life since.
Well, it looked like the house they were in was really nice.
Yeah.
And he was remarried. He had remarried since Karen passed away.
Did they have any kids?
That I don't know. That I don't know. I believe her name is Tiffany,
Hmm.
and they were in Birmingham, Alabama.
So the kids that he had with Karen were living with him and his.
The younger daughters, so she had 2 boys that were in college at the time of the
Mhm.
murder, and 2 girls that were still at home. And yes, Carol Johnson, Karen's mother, stated in a interview, I think it was in 2014 or 15, that after Karen died, that David brought the girls to a balloon release at the cemetery they were
Mhm.
doing in memory of Karen,
Mhm.
and she stated that David just really did not want to talk about Karen
Mhm.
and didn't want the kids to either, and that seems to be a trend.
Yeah, I mean, it was said earlier in what you presented that her mother said that the kids were not allowed to talk about it.
Right, and then, she also stated that his silence screamed
Mhm.
his
Mhm.
guilt,
Yeah.
and, this has been hard for her family. Can't even imagine what the kids are going through because now,
Mhm.
not only did they lose their mother, they lost her at the hands of their father,
Right. Right.
and now they have to grieve again.
So I can only assume that because he pled guilty in his arraignment, that or pled not guilty, sorry, in his arraignment, that it's going to go to trial.
Yes.
So we're going to see. We don't know that a trial date's been set yet. Is that right?
We don't know,
Yeah,
no.
but we can only assume that when it does go to trial, that there's going to be a lot of updates to be had. But as long as this investigation's been going on, too, from now until trial, there's a lot of discovery that the defense attorneys are going to have to do on his behalf, and so there's a lot of legwork yet to be done. Um, and of course, that may not be exactly true either, because the sheriff's department may have such a good investigation file on this that the discovery doesn't take that long. It's just if the defense wants to call any experts or anything like that, they have to go out and find them and brief them and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So, well, you know, Taryn, again, this is a trend of, silence screams guilt.
It does.
And it here we are. This is just the second case that we've talked about, and in both of them, we see, we see instances of people that just forcibly remain silent.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, the difference here is it seems like the investigative body just remained steadfast and did their job and continue to do their job very effectively as law enforcement officers, and come to see justice for Karen Swift.
Well, it's all these rumors that you have to sift through.
Hmm.
You have to sift through them. You have to look at everybody,
Yeah,
and I think they did a great job with that.
yeah,
And we'll see the rest of we'll know more and we'll update this whenever it does go to trial because I followed it since 2011. So
so where were you in Tennessee when that happened
I
in
was in Tennessee.
2011?
I was in Tennessee.
Okay.
I remember this very well. I remember watching the Dateline with Karen's picture on it, and she looked very familiar to me.
Hmm.
I don't know if I had seen her before somewhere, but she did still does. When I see her, she looks familiar to me.
Hmm.
She's a very beautiful woman.
I don't know. See, 2011. No, I was here.
You
I
were
was in
here?
Tennessee.
Okay, so
Yeah,
yeah. You don't remember this
I
though.
don't. I
Well,
don't.
you didn't have me shoving all these true crime cases down on you
Well,
all the time.
yeah, I mean, that's part of it, and that's what makes this exciting for me because you've taught me a whole lot. But back then, I traveled constant. I
Right,
mean, I was all over the southeast and the southwest, and I just did not spend a whole lot of time at home,
right,
so I didn't keep up with local news very much. And yeah, I really didn't have any need.
right.
I came here to sleep for a few days at a time, and then I'd be gone again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was here. That was the year Presley was born.
okay.
So I remember watching it,
So
you know.
your first grandchild was born when
Yeah.
all this was going
Yeah,
on, or
yeah.
before, just before all this.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm telling my age now.
Uh oh. Well, you've aged very nicely.
Well, thank you, dear.
Beautiful. And that's Karen Swift, Dyersburg, Tennessee, 2011, Dyer County, Northwest Tennessee, and
Yeah, if
just
we're missing anything, if we have anything, that's incorrect, feel free to comment.
yeah, we definitely encourage everybody that knows anything to reach out. We keep it anonymous, and you can reach out. You'll see the slide here in just a minute at the end of the show with our email address where you can reach out to us,
Yeah.
um, and also some other local law enforcement contact information there. Uh,
I think this is pretty much wrapped up. I mean, as far as, you know, the case.
hmm
So, I mean, if you comment, just make sure that it's
in good
no
taste.
right.
Hmm.
Please, no victim shaming,
No bullying.
no bullying.
Okay.
Be nice. Be kind.
Thank you, sweetheart. It's been fun. It's been real, and I can't wait to the next one
Me either.
because it just means I'm with you.
Oh, can't wait.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. This has been Walking Between Shadows. Again, I'm your host, Ben Elliott, and my wife, Taryn Elliott. Look for our next episodes coming soon, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.